As I was drying my tears at my only son's wake, I heard the cold voice of Carla, my daughter-in-law, cut through the silence of the room. "You have to leave this house tomorrow. I sold everything, and I'm going to start a new life." I was paralyzed. People were still signing the condolence book, and yet she chose that moment, the final farewell to my son Thomas, to stab me with those cruel words. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I didn't want to turn my boy's goodbye into a shameful scene. I just wanted him to rest in peace, at least on his last day on this earth. But the final blow came days later during the reading of the will. Carla, with a mocking smile, whispered, "I hope you like being homeless, because you're not getting a single cent." What she didn't imagine is that fate had other plans. The instant the lawyer opened the envelope, Karma finally came knocking on her door, and her smile vanished in the blink of an eye. But before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the Elderly Stories channel and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love to know how far our stories are reaching. My name is Margaret Johnson. I'm 67 years old, and I've lived almost my entire life in Denver, Colorado. I lost my husband Edward to a heart attack 8 years ago, leaving me alone with our son Thomas. After Edward was gone, I sold our large house in the suburbs and used the money to help Thomas and his wife Carla buy the house where we all lived. It was a family agreement. I would contribute financially and help with the chores and raising my grandson Lucas. "Mom, this house will always be your home too," Thomas told me that day as we signed the papers. His sincere smile calmed any worries I might have had about not having my name on the deed. After all, what son would kick out his own mother? In the early years, everything seemed to work well. I cooked almost every night, kept the house clean, picked Lucas up from school, and tended the garden that became the prettiest in the neighborhood. I didn't mind doing these tasks. It was my way of contributing to our family. But things started to change subtly after Thomas was promoted. Carla started making comments. "Margaret, do you really have to use the blender so early?" "Oh, I think this house is getting a bit small for 3 adults, don't you think?" Small comments that alone seemed harmless, but together formed a pattern I ignored out of love for my son and grandson. Then on a normal Wednesday morning, I received the call that would change everything. Thomas, my 42-year-old boy, had suffered a brain aneurysm while at work. By the time I got to the hospital, he was already gone. The funeral was 3 days later. The church was filled with flowers and familiar faces, all in shock at the sudden departure of someone so young. I sat in the front row holding 9-year-old Lucas's hand, trying to be strong for him while my own heart was shattered. It was when the last guest was leaving that Carla approached. Her elegant black dress contrasted with her dry, calculating eyes. She waited until we were relatively alone, with only a few distant relatives still gathering their things. "Margaret," she said, her voice low but firm. "Now that Thomas is gone, we need to be practical. You have to leave the house tomorrow. I already have an interested buyer, and I want to move to Miami with Lucas." I was paralyzed. "Carla, we just buried my son. Our son. How can you think about selling the house now, and where do you expect me to go?" Her gaze was icy. "That's really not my problem, is it? The house is in my name. You must have saved something all these years living here for free." "Free?" My voice cracked. "I gave $180,000 for the down payment on this house, not to mention everything I do daily." "Without proof," she interrupted, shrugging. "It was a gift to your son, not to me, and now he's gone." Before I could respond, Carla walked away to talk to her brother Gregory, who shot me a nasty look from across the room. I sat there, hands trembling, unable to comprehend the cruelty of that moment. That night, alone in the room I had occupied for 5 years, I couldn't sleep. I remembered all the little clues I had ignored. Carla hiding mail from Thomas, conversations abruptly stopping. When I entered the room, documents quickly put away in drawers. I had been naive, trusting in my son's protection without thinking about what would happen when he was no longer here. While organizing some things, I found a small box Thomas had given me 3 months earlier. "Save this, Mom. Don't tell anyone you have it. One day it might be important," he told me. At the time, I thought it was just some sentimental keepsake. I opened the box with trembling hands and found a key with a small note. Safety deposit box, 247 First National Bank, password, Grandma's birthday. Next to it was a business card for a lawyer, Richard Fuentes, with a handwritten note. If anything happens to me, find Mr. Fuentes immediately. A chill ran down my spine. Did Thomas know? Had he foreseen that I would need protection? With my heart racing, I put the key and the card in my purse. For the first time since Thomas's death, I felt a small flame of hope. The next morning, Carla knocked on my bedroom door at 7:30 a.m. "I need you to be gone before noon," she announced coldly. "The real estate agent is coming to photograph the house at 1 p.m. "Carla, please," I begged. "I helped pay for this house. Where do you expect me to go so quickly?" She sighed impatiently. "There are shelters for people your age, or maybe one of your friends can help." "Frankly, Margaret, you should have prepared better for your old age instead of depending on my husband." "My son," I corrected, feeling a rage I rarely experienced. "And this house is also partly mine." "Prove it," she challenged me, a smug smile on her lips. "Is your name on any document, any contract? No. Then you have until noon." I didn't argue anymore. Instead, I started packing my things, putting everything I could into 4 large suitcases and some boxes. Family photos, mementos of Edward, gifts Thomas had given me over the years, everything I could carry. The rest, including furniture I had brought from my old house, would have to stay. As I packed, I heard Carla on the phone with someone, probably her brother. "I finally got rid of her," she laughed. "You won't believe how much they're offering for the house. With Thomas's life insurance, I'll never have to work again." That old fool really believed she was part of the family. Her words cut me deeply, but they also ignited something in me, a determination I didn't know I had. I finished packing, put everything in my old car, and looked one last time at the house. I helped buy the house where I thought I would live out my last days. Lucas ran to me before I got in the car. "Grandma, where are you going? Why are you taking all your things?" His innocent eyes were red and swollen. I hugged him tightly, feeling the tears burn. "Grandma is going to live somewhere else for a little while, sweetie, but I promise we'll see each other soon." "Mom said we're moving far away," he whispered. "I don't want to go. I want to stay with you." "Lucas," Carla called from the doorway, her tone sharp. "Get inside now. Let your grandmother go." I gave my grandson one last hug and got in the car, my hands shaking so much I could barely turn the key in the ignition. I had no idea where I was going, but I knew my first stop: the First National Bank. I drove downtown on autopilot, my thoughts as chaotic as the traffic around me. The weight of Carla's betrayal was still fresh, but now there was something else. Curiosity about what Thomas had left in that safety deposit box. The First National Bank occupied an imposing granite building with classic columns that seemed out of place in Denver's modern architecture. I parked my car loaded with everything left of my life and went inside, feeling out of place with my tear-swollen face and wrinkled clothes. "Good morning," I said to the receptionist, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I need to access a safety deposit box." After verifying my identity and the key, a security guard led me to the vault. The cold, impersonal atmosphere of the place contrasted with the whirlwind of emotions inside me. My hands trembled as I inserted the key into box 247, turning it along with the password. My mother's birthday, just as Thomas had indicated. The box opened with a metallic click. Inside was a black folder, a brown envelope, and a small wooden box. My heart raced as I removed the contents and took them to a private room designated for clients. I opened the envelope first. Inside, I found a handwritten letter from Thomas. "Dear Mom, if you're reading this, it's because my suspicions were true. I know it sounds crazy, but in the last few months, I started to distrust Carla's intentions. I found conversations between her and Gregory discussing plans to get rid of you and sell the house as soon as they could. I also discovered she has been diverting money from our joint account to a secret account. Mom, I am so sorry. I should have confronted Carla, but I wanted to have concrete proof first. While investigating, I realized I needed to protect you in case something happened to me. In the black folder, you'll find important documents. A signed contract between us, recognizing your financial contribution to the house purchase bank statements, proving the transfer, and a legal document guaranteeing your lifetime residency rights regardless of what happens to me. All properly notarized. In the wooden box, there's a USB drive with emails, text messages, and conversation recordings between Carla and Gregory that prove their intentions. I also included a copy of my updated will, leaving you my share of the house and half of all my assets. Contact Richard Fuentes immediately. He is my lawyer and a trusted friend, and he has all the instructions to help you. I love you very much, Mom. You always took care of me. Now it's my turn to take care of you. With love, Thomas. I read the letter 3 times, tears falling freely onto the paper. My Thomas, my boy, had realized everything and had silently prepared a safety net for me. Amidst the pain of loss, I felt a wave of love for him stronger than ever. With hands still shaking, I opened the black folder. As Thomas had described, all the documents were there. The contract detailing my financial contribution bank receipts, and most importantly, a legal document guaranteeing my right to live in the house for the rest of my life, all signed, dated, and notarized just 3 months ago. The folder's box contained a USB drive and a copy of Thomas's will. I had no way to check the USB drive's contents there, but the will was clear. Thomas left me his share of the house and half of all his assets, including his life insurance. The other half would be placed in a trust fund for Lucas, accessible only when he turned 25. Carla didn't know it, but she had just made a huge mistake by kicking me out. With new determination, I put everything back in my purse and picked up my cell phone. The lawyer, Richard Fuentes' card was still in my wallet. I dialed the number, surprised to be put through directly to him after mentioning my name, Mrs. Johnson. His voice was warm and professional. I was expecting your call. Thomas warned me this might happen. Can we meet today? 2 hours later, I was sitting in Richard Fuentes' elegant office in Denver's financial district. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and kind eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. Thomas was more than a client. He was my friend, Richard explained as he examined the documents I had brought. He came to see me about 4 months ago, very worried. He said he had discovered something disturbing about his wife. What exactly did he discover? I asked. Richard hesitated briefly. Thomas found emails between Carla and her brother discussing plans for a future without you in the house. He also discovered suspicious bank transfers. He was investigating discreetly, gathering evidence. And he suspected that Carla might... My voice broke, unable to complete the sentence. Thomas never explicitly mentioned fearing for his life, Richard replied cautiously. But he was certainly worried enough to take extraordinary preventative measures. Richard connected the USB drive to his computer, and we spent the next hour reviewing its contents. There were dozens of emails between Carla and Gregory, some dating back more than 2 years, discussing how much easier it would be if I wasn't in the house. How Carla was tired of having an old busybody controlling her life. But the most shocking were the recent messages. After we get rid of her, we can sell the house and split the money. Thomas never needs to know how much we really got. Carla to Gregory 3 months ago. Remember that doctor you met? Could he help with the little life insurance problem? 5 years is a long time to wait. Gregory to Carla 2 months ago. I felt a chill, realizing the implications. Were they talking about hurting Thomas? Was it possible this is... Is this enough for an investigation? I asked Richard, my mouth suddenly dry. It's circumstantial, but definitely troubling, he replied with a grave expression. I'm going to forward this to a colleague who works on criminal cases. In the meantime, we have a more immediate problem to solve, getting your house back. Richard typed quickly on his computer and printed several documents. This is a formal cease and desist warning that I will send to Carla today, informing her of your legal rights to the property and demanding immediate access. I also prepared a request for an emergency restraining order to prevent any sale of the house until the court can review the case. I signed where he indicated feeling a strange mix of gratitude to Thomas for protecting me and sadness for not being able to thank him. One last thing, Richard said, opening a drawer and taking out an envelope. Thomas left this with me to give to you in case anything happened to him. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a key to a new apartment and a debit card with a note. My apartment downtown. I use it for clients occasionally, but it's always ready. The card's pin is Lucas's birthday. There's enough for you to start over if you need to. I love you, Mom. The tears returned with full force. Even in the midst of his own suspicions and worries, Thomas had thought of everything to protect me. He knew, I whispered. Somehow he knew he would need to protect me. Richard nodded solemnly. Thomas was an extraordinary man, and now we are going to honor his memory by ensuring his mother is protected exactly as he wanted. Leaving Richard's office, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Thomas's death purpose. Carla had completely underestimated me, seeing me only as a helpless old woman she could discard when convenient. I drove to the address of Thomas's apartment downtown, an elegant building with security at the entrance. The doorman smiled upon seeing my name on the permanent authorized list and handed me a full set of keys. The apartment was small but sophisticated, with a view of the mountains in the distance. It was impeccably clean and stocked with basic groceries, another sign of Thomas's foresight. I collapsed on the sofa, physically and emotionally exhausted. As the sun set over Denver, I picked up my phone and saw 3 missed calls from Carla. There was also a text message. "You forgot some things. I'll donate them to charity tomorrow if you don't come for them. By the way, where are you? I need your new address for the insurance documents." I smiled bitterly. Carla wasn't worried about me. She wanted to know where I was to ensure she received the insurance money quickly. What she didn't know is that I now held all the cards. Instead of responding, I called Richard. "I think it's time to schedule a meeting," I said, a firmness in my voice that surprised me. "I'd like to see Carla's expression when she finds out her perfect plan just fell apart." 3 days passed since Carla kicked me out of the house I helped buy. 3 days in which I settled into Thomas's apartment downtown, a refuge he had presciently prepared. 3 days planning the moment I would reclaim not only my dignity, but also justice for my son. Richard Fuentes organized everything meticulously. The meeting would be in his office at 10:30 a.m. Carla received a formal notification requesting her presence to discuss urgent matters relating to the estate of Thomas Johnson. She didn't know I would be there, nor did she imagine what was about to happen. That morning, I dressed with care, a conservative navy blue suit I had bought years ago for Thomas's wedding. I wanted to appear respectable, serene, and above all, in control. No longer the submissive mother-in-law who could be discarded like old furniture. I arrived at Richard's office 30 minutes early. He greeted me with an encouraging smile. "Are you ready for this, Margaret?" he asked, offering me a cup of tea. "More than ready," I replied, surprised by my own conviction. It's time for Carla to understand that she underestimated not only me but Thomas as well. At 10:05 a.m., the receptionist announced Carla's arrival. Richard led me to an adjoining conference room where I could hear everything without being seen. Initially a small tactical advantage, he suggested. Through the partially open door, I saw Carla enter the main office. She was impeccably dressed in a fitted black dress, her hair perfectly styled, the image of the elegant, grieving widow. At her side was her brother Gregory, tall and with an arrogant expression. Both carried briefcases and exuded confidence. "Mr. Fuentes." Carla extended her hand, her voice controlled in a tone of studied sadness. "Thank you for seeing us at such a difficult time. This is my brother Gregory, who is helping me with Thomas's affairs." Richard nodded formally. "Mrs. Johnson, Mr. Davis, thank you for coming. Please have a seat." Carla crossed her legs elegantly. "I must say I was a bit confused by your letter. I thought all matters of the estate would be handled by Thomas's company lawyer." "Actually," Richard began, opening a folder, "I have been Thomas's personal lawyer for over 5 years. He entrusted several confidential matters to me, including his most recent will." Carla blinked, momentarily unsettled. "Most recent will? I'm not aware of any will, other than the one we made together when Lucas was born." "That is precisely the reason for this meeting," Richard continued, his voice professional. Thomas made significant changes to his will approximately 3 months ago with specific instructions to be implemented immediately upon his passing. Gregory leaned forward, his tone aggressive. What kind of changes, and why would Thomas do that without informing Carla? Richard ignored the second question. The changes primarily concern the distribution of assets and the shared residence. But before we get into details, there is someone Thomas wanted to participate in this discussion. That was my cue. I took a deep breath and entered the room. Carla's face transformed instantly. Shock and then barely concealed rage crossed her features before she managed to recompose her mask of civility. "Margaret," she forced a tense smile, "what are you doing here?" "Mrs. Johnson was specifically named in the new will," Richard explained before I could answer. "Her presence is not only appropriate, but necessary." I sat directly across the table from Carla and Gregory. Their discomfort was palpable. "Let's get straight to the point." Richard continued placing documents on the table. "First, I'd like to clarify the situation of the residence at 1542 Maple Street." Carla interjected quickly. "The house is exclusively in my name. It was a joint decision between Thomas and me to simplify legal matters." "Actually," Richard replied, sliding the first document across the table. "Here we have a legally binding contract signed by Thomas and Margaret Johnson, recognizing Mrs. Johnson's substantial contribution of $180,000 to the property's purchase with the express stipulation of lifetime residency rights." Carla's face visibly paled. This can't be legal. I never saw this document before." "It is properly notarized, as you can see," Richard pointed out. "And here are the bank statements confirming the transfer of the mentioned amount from Mrs. Johnson's account to the joint account used for the down payment." Gregory grabbed the documents, examining them frantically. "This could be challenged. Thomas might have been coerced." "By his own mother?" Richard asked, raising an eyebrow. "That would be difficult to prove, especially considering Thomas also left this." He played a recording on his computer. Thomas's voice filled the room. "I am recording this as an additional record of my free and conscious decision to legally recognize my mother, Margaret Johnson's financial contribution to the purchase of our home. This document guarantees her right to reside on the property for the rest of her life, regardless of any future circumstances. I am doing this of my own free will without any coercion." Tears welled in my eyes, hearing my son's voice so clear and determined, even though he was no longer here. Carla and Gregory exchanged alarmed glances. Their strategy was crumbling quickly. "There's more," Richard continued, relentless. "Thomas's updated will clearly specifies the division of his assets. Half to Lucas in a trust fund, accessible at age 25, and half to Margaret Johnson, including his share of the house, and 50% of the life insurance benefit." Carla stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. Thomas would never do this. We are going to contest these documents." "You are free to try," Richard replied calmly. "But before you make that decision, you might want to consider this." He turned his monitor to display a series of emails and text messages between Carla and Gregory. The color completely drained from Carla's face. "Thomas came to me a few months ago with concerns about suspicious activities," Richard explained. He had discovered rather disturbing communications and unexplained financial transfers. Gregory tried to regain control. "This is an invasion of privacy. Thomas had no right to access Carla's private communications." "Actually, he had every right to investigate suspicious activities in joint accounts," Richard retorted. "And the content of these communications is at the very least troubling. Discussions about getting rid of the old woman, selling the house without Thomas knowing the real value, and even some disturbing references to speeding up access to the life insurance." My stomach churned hearing this confirmed aloud. Part of me still refused to believe Carla could be involved in Thomas's death, but the evidence was becoming harder and harder to ignore. Carla seemed on the verge of falling apart. Her face alternated between extreme paleness and red blotches of rage. "That doesn't prove anything," she hissed. "You're twisting innocent conversations." Finally, after all this time listening, I decided to speak. "Carla." My voice was firm, but low. The day of Thomas's funeral, you kicked me out of the house I helped buy. You said I meant nothing, that I had no rights. You treated me like trash the moment my son, your husband, had just been buried." Carla tried to interrupt, but I continued. "What you didn't realize is that Thomas saw right through your facade. He realized how you really treated me when he wasn't looking, and he took steps to protect me." "This is absurd," she replied, but her voice was trembling. "Thomas and I were happy. He trusted me implicitly." "Then how do you explain this?" I asked, placing a photo on the table of the bank transfers Carla had made from the joint account to a private account in the Cayman Islands. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard cleared his throat. "I have 2 options to offer today. First, we agree to the terms of Thomas's will. Margaret returns to the house immediately with all rights guaranteed, and none of this disturbing information goes beyond this room." Gregory leaned forward. "And the second option? We contest everything in court," Richard replied simply. "Every email, every transfer, every malicious word about Margaret becomes public record. And of course the relevant authorities would be informed about certain coincidences related to Thomas's sudden passing." Carla looked like she was suffocating. "Are you accusing me of something?" "I'm not accusing anyone of anything," Richard replied smoothly. "I am simply pointing out that Thomas was concerned enough to take extraordinary precautions. The court can draw its own conclusions." The clock on the wall seemed to boom in the ensuing silence. Finally, Carla spoke, her voice defeated. "What exactly do you want, Margaret?" I looked her directly in the eye. "I want exactly what Thomas wanted for me. My place in the house I helped buy my share of his inheritance, and the right to be part of my grandson's life." Carla and Gregory conferred quickly in low voices. After a few tense minutes, she turned back to Richard. "We will agree to the terms of the will, but I want this formalized detailing exactly what belongs to whom." Richard was already prepared with the documents. "Naturally, everything is ready for signing." As Carla signed the papers with trembling hands, I noticed something in her eyes I had never seen before. Fear. Fear of me, a woman she had considered insignificant. Leaving Richard's office that morning, I breathed in the fresh Denver air with a sense of bittersweet victory. I had won a battle that should never have existed, but the cost had been immense. My son was still gone. Still, I felt a new strength rising within me. Thomas had protected me in ways I never imagined, and now it was up to me to keep living to honor his legacy. On the way back to the apartment, I received a message from Richard. "Everything is formalized. You can return to the house whenever you're ready." I stopped at the small corner cafe for a tea to process everything that had happened. The autumn sun streamed through the windows, casting a golden glow on the tables. I was exhausted, but for the first time since Thomas's death, I didn't feel powerless. The decision to return to the house wasn't simple. On one hand, it was my right, and I wanted to be near Thomas's memories and have easy access to Lucas. On the other, the thought of sharing space with Carla after everything that had happened seemed unbearable. I decided I would return, but on my own terms. This would no longer be a situation where I felt like an intruder in my own home. Carla would have to understand that things had changed forever. When I arrived at the house on Maple Street that afternoon, I found Carla in the living room with partially packed suitcases. She froze when she saw me walk in with my own keys. "I'm back," I announced simply. Carla nodded rigidly. "Richard called me. You can have the guest room again." "No," I replied firmly. "I'll be staying in the master bedroom." Her face hardened. "That's my room." "It was Thomas's room, too," I replied. "And according to the terms of the agreement, I have the right to half the house. The master bedroom is part of that." Before she could answer, Lucas came running down the stairs and practically threw himself into my arms. "Grandma, you're back," he exclaimed, his small body trembling with emotion. "Mom said you had gone to live somewhere else forever." I hugged him tightly, looking over his head at Carla, who had the decency to look ashamed. "I'm back, my love," I whispered to Lucas, "and I'm not going anywhere." That night was tense with Carla and me navigating a strange new territory. I cooked dinner as I always had, but the silence at the table was oppressive. Lucas tried to fill the gaps with stories from school, but even he sensed the tension in the air. After dinner, as I was cleaning the kitchen, Carla approached her arms crossed defensively. "We need to set some rules," she began. I placed the last dish in the drainer and turned to face her. "Yes, we do. First rule, we never lie to each other again. Second, Lucas is the priority. Third, this is my house just as much as it is yours, and I expect to be treated with respect." Carla seemed surprised by my assertiveness, but nodded slowly. "Fair. I also want to add that we need privacy. Separate areas, separate schedules for using common spaces." "Agreed," I replied. "And Lucas will have guaranteed time with both of us." A strange expression crossed Carla's face. For a moment, I thought I saw genuine sadness in her eyes. "I really did love Thomas, you know," she said softly. "In my own way." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say that wouldn't reopen wounds or provoke more conflict. Instead, I dried my hands and left the kitchen. In the weeks that followed, Carla and I developed a cautious routine. Like two predators sharing the same territory, we kept a respectful distance, interacting mainly through Lucas. A month after my return, Richard called me with disturbing news. Thomas's final autopsy raised some questions. Although the official cause of death is still aneurysm, elevated levels of certain substances were found that could have contributed to the condition. "It's not conclusive," Richard explained carefully, "but the medical examiner found it suspicious enough to alert the authorities. They are considering opening an investigation." I felt a knot in my stomach. Part of me still refused to believe Carla could have gone that far. It was one thing to plan to get rid of me. It was something else entirely to hurt Thomas. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the little things I had noticed but ignored in the last months of Thomas's life. He seemed more tired. He had frequent headaches. Sometimes he seemed confused. All symptoms we attributed to work stress. The next day I noticed Carla on the phone in the backyard speaking in low, urgent tones. When she saw me through the window, she quickly hung up and came inside her face a mask of composure. "Margaret, I was thinking," she said with forced casualness. "Maybe we should sell the house after all, split the money, and go our separate ways. There are a lot of painful memories here." I looked at her for a long time. "No, Carla. We are not selling the house. Thomas wanted Lucas to grow up here, and that's what's going to happen." Her eyes narrowed briefly before she forced a smile. "Of course, just an idea. I'm just trying to find a way to move forward." That afternoon, I received a call from Detective Garcia of the Denver Police Department requesting a meeting to discuss the circumstances of Thomas Johnson's passing. I agreed immediately. The detective was a middle-aged man with sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything. We met at a nearby coffee shop away from the house, and Carla, "Mrs. Johnson, we are investigating some inconsistencies related to your son's death," he explained after the introductions. "Did you notice any changes in his behavior or health in the preceding months?" I told him about the fatigue, the headaches, the moments of confusion. And what about Mrs. Carla Johnson? What was their relationship like? I hesitated. Despite everything, accusing my daughter-in-law of murder was an extremely serious step. "On the surface, they seemed fine," I answered carefully. "But Thomas had discovered some financial irregularities in the months before his death. He was investigating discreetly." The detective took notes. "We are aware of those transfers. We also discovered that Mrs. Carla Johnson significantly increased Thomas's life insurance about 6 months ago without his apparent knowledge." I felt a knot in my stomach. I didn't know that. "We are also investigating a connection between her brother Gregory Davis and a doctor who recently lost his license for questionable practices," he continued. "This doctor may have supplied substances that, administered in small doses over time, could cause symptoms similar to what you described and eventually lead to an aneurysm." My world seemed to crumble all over again. The possibility that Thomas had been slowly poisoned right under my nose was unbearable. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice almost a whisper. "We continue to investigate," the detective replied. "And I suggest you be extremely cautious at home, Mrs. Johnson. Do not mention this conversation to Carla." 2 days later, while Carla was at work and Lucas was at school, I did something I never imagined doing. I searched her home office, going through drawers and cabinets looking for, I didn't even know what. In the back of a file drawer, I found a folder marked T insurance. Inside was Thomas's life insurance policy, altered 6 months prior to $2 million with Carla as the sole beneficiary. Next to it were detailed notes of deposits and withdrawals and a name, Dr. Martin Robles. With trembling hands, I photographed all the documents with my cell phone and put everything back exactly as I found it. Then I sent the images to Detective Garcia and Richard. The response was almost immediate. An hour later, I received a call from the detective. "Mrs. Johnson, do not go home today. We will be executing a search warrant at the residence this afternoon. We have reason to believe Mrs. Carla Johnson and Gregory Davis conspired to harm your son." I sat on a nearby park bench, too shocked to cry. My phone rang again. It was Lucas's school. "Mrs. Johnson, Carla just picked Lucas up early. She said there was a family emergency." My blood ran cold. "When exactly?" "About 20 minutes ago." In a panic, I called Detective Garcia again. "She picked up Lucas from school. I think she knows we're investigating." What followed was a blur. An immediate search warrant issued. All city exits, monitored bank accounts frozen. The police found the house empty, but Carla's passport was still there, meaning she likely hadn't left the country. I spent the most agonizing night of my life imagining where my grandson could be if he was safe. Carla had never shown cruelty towards Lucas, but now I doubted everything I thought I knew about her. The next morning, at 5:23 a.m., my phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Grandma?" Lucas's small, frightened voice made my heart leap. "Lucas, where are you? Are you okay?" "We're in a hotel. Mom's sleeping, but she's been crying. She said we had to run away, that bad people are trying to separate us." "Lucas, what hotel? Can you see the name?" I heard the sound of a curtain opening. "It's the Mountain View Lodge. It has a big mountain on the sign." "Great, Lucas. You're being very brave. The police are going to—" "What are you doing?" Carla's voice sounded distant, then closer, as she presumably snatched the phone from Lucas. "Margaret, you called the police, didn't you? You're trying to take my son from me." "Carla." I spoke as calmly as possible. "Please bring Lucas back. He needs stability, not to be on the run." "Just like you needed stability," she retorted, her voice shaking. "You ruined everything. Thomas and I were fine until you interfered, demanding to live with us, controlling our lives." "Carla Thomas is dead," I replied firmly, "and the police are investigating how it happened. Do you really want Lucas to be raised by someone who—" "Don't say that," she screamed. "I loved Thomas. It was Gregory who— I never wanted Thomas to get hurt. Gregory said it was just to speed up his retirement so we could have more time together. The substances weren't supposed to— He wasn't supposed to." Her crying made the words incomprehensible. I seized the opportunity. "Carla, listen. If what you're saying is true, that it was Gregory who planned everything, then come back. Tell the police your side. Don't make things worse by running with Lucas." There was a long silence, broken only by occasional sobs. "It's too late," she finally replied, her voice defeated. "They'll never believe me now." "They will believe you if you come back voluntarily," I insisted. "Think about Lucas. He needs stability, not a life on the run." As I spoke, I motioned frantically to Detective Garcia, who had arrived and was monitoring the call. He showed me a piece of paper where he had written, "Keep talking. Tactical team in position." "Promise me you won't try to take Lucas from me," Carla pleaded suddenly, sounding very young and vulnerable. "I promise we will always do what's best for Lucas," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "He needs his mother, but he also needs the truth and justice for his father." More silence. Then, "I'm coming. Not for the system, not for you. For Lucas." An hour later, I watched from a distance as Carla walked out of the hotel holding Lucas's hand. She looked smaller somehow, her shoulders slumped, and her face stained with tears. Officers approached her carefully, while others led Lucas to where I was waiting. He ran to me, and I hugged him with all the strength I could without hurting him. "Grandma, is Mom in trouble?" He asked, his eyes wide and scared. "The situation is complicated, my love," I answered honestly, "but we will get through this together somehow." As I watched Carla being placed in the police car, I felt a confusing mix of emotions: rage, pity, grief, and surprisingly, a small measure of relief. The truth, as painful as it was finally coming to light. I hugged Lucas tighter, feeling his small head on my shoulder. Thomas might be gone, but part of him lived on in this child, and I would do anything to protect him, just as Thomas had done for me. The weeks following Carla's arrest were a whirlwind of statements, court hearings, and difficult decisions. As Lucas's grandmother, I became his temporary guardian while the legal process unfolded. At 9 years old, he was too young to fully understand what was happening, but old enough to know his life would never be the same. The case quickly became a local media sensation. Denver's Black Widow, they called Carla, as reporters swarmed our house, waiting for any scrap of information. I kept Lucas away from them, and the news preferring to explain the situation in my own words appropriately for his age. "Did Mom do something very bad?" he asked me one night as I tucked him in. His big eyes, so much like Thomas's, looked at me with a mix of confusion and sadness. "Sometimes adults make very bad decisions," I replied carefully. "And then they have to face the consequences of those decisions. Your mother is talking to people who will decide what happens now." "But will she come back?" The question I dreaded. "I don't know, honey. It might be a long time before we know." The truth was, Carla had agreed to testify against her brother Gregory in exchange for a reduced sentence. According to her confession, Gregory had devised the plan to kill Thomas slowly with substances that would mimic a natural health problem. Carla admitted to knowing about the plan and doing nothing to stop it, but insisted she had never actively participated in administering the substances. That part had been Gregory's. Dr. Martin Robles, the doctor who supplied the substances, was also arrested and agreed to cooperate. His license had already been revoked for questionable medical practices, and he faced serious charges that could keep him in prison for the rest of his life. One day, about 2 months after Carla's arrest, Richard invited me to lunch. We chose a small Italian restaurant away from the media and curious onlookers. "How is Lucas?" he asked after we placed our orders. "He's having good days and bad days," I answered honestly. "He started therapy last week. The therapist says he's processing the trauma normally for his age." Richard nodded, his hands clasped on the table. "And you, Margaret? How are you holding up?" The question took me by surprise. I was so focused on caring for Lucas, on dealing with lawyers and police, that I had barely had time to process my own feelings. "I'm functioning," I finally replied. "It's all I can do for now." "You know, Thomas would be very proud of how you're handling all this," Richard said softly. "He always talked about your strength." I felt tears forming. "I don't feel strong. Sometimes I feel like I'm just faking it for Lucas." "Sometimes faking strength is the very definition of strength." Richard smiled gently. "But I called you here to discuss something specific. Gregory's trial is scheduled to begin in a few weeks. Carla has already reached a plea agreement and will testify against him. And the prosecutor would like you to testify as well, about Thomas's behavior in the months before his death, about his relationship with Carla and Gregory, about the symptoms he was presenting." I felt a weight form in my stomach. The idea of sitting in a courtroom and reliving those moments with Gregory staring at me seemed unbearable. "Do I have a choice?" "Technically, yes. They could subpoena you, but they would prefer your voluntary cooperation," Richard explained. "Honestly, your testimony would be very valuable to the case." I took a deep breath. "And what about Lucas Will? He have to testify too?" "No, absolutely not," Richard assured me quickly. "The prosecutor is very clear about keeping Lucas out of this." I thought for a moment. If I testify, does it mean Gregory will go to prison for longer, that he won't be able to hurt anyone else? Potentially, yes. Your testimony would significantly strengthen the case. Then I'll testify, I decided, for Thomas and for Lucas. Gregory Davis's trial began on a cold January morning. The courtroom was packed. It seemed all of Denver wanted to witness the proceedings against the man accused of meticulously murdering my son. Gregory looked smaller in the defendant's chair, his expensive suit now replaced by prison-issued clothing. His eyes, however, still held that calculating gleam that had always unsettled me. The prosecution's case was meticulous. Forensic evidence, bank statements, emails, text messages, a trail of evidence that linked Gregory directly to Thomas's death. Dr. Robles testified about how Gregory had approached him requesting something that would look natural but be definitive, and how he had supplied a combination of substances that over time would cause the cardiovascular system to deteriorate, eventually leading to an aneurysm or heart attack. Then came the moment I dreaded most Carla's testimony. She entered the room, escorted looking like a ghostly version of herself. Her once impeccable hair was dull, her face makeup-free, her eyes lifeless. As she passed the defendant's chair, Gregory looked at her with such hatred that the bailiffs had to warn him. Carla took the oath and sat down. Her voice was low, almost inaudible at times, as she described how Gregory had conceived the plan. Thomas was becoming increasingly suspicious of my spending, she explained. He started questioning transfers, monitoring accounts. Gregory said we could solve everything permanently, get the insurance money, sell the house, get rid of Margaret. He said it would be like Thomas just got sick naturally. "And did you agree to this plan?" the prosecutor asked. Carla hesitated. "No, not explicitly. I didn't stop him. Gregory said he would take care of everything, that I just had to act normally." "But you knew your husband was being poisoned." Tears began to stream down Carla's face. "I suspected. Thomas started having constant headaches, fatigue. I told Gregory we should stop, but he said it was too late, that we had to see it through." "And what did you do with that information, Mrs. Johnson?" "Nothing," she whispered. "I did nothing." From the gallery, I watched her face as she spoke. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction seeing her reduced to this, confessing her complicity in my son's death. But what I felt, surprisingly, was a profound sadness. What kind of emptiness existed in Carla's soul that allowed her to witness her husband's slow suffering without intervening? When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the witness stand with trembling legs, but my head held high. I spoke about Thomas's last months, the headaches, the occasional confusion, the sleepless nights. I described how he had become more reserved, how he seemed worried about something he wouldn't share with me. "Thomas came to me about 3 months before his death," I told the court. "He gave me a key and a lawyer's card. He told me to keep it and not tell anyone." "And did you know what that key was for?" the prosecutor asked. "Not at the time. I later found out it was the key to a safety deposit box containing evidence he had gathered against Carla and Gregory, suspicious bank transfers, recorded conversations, emails." "So your son suspected something was wrong." "Thomas was always observant. I think he started noticing patterns, inconsistencies. He was investigating discreetly. When the defense attorney began his cross-examination, he tried to paint me as a resentful mother-in-law, inventing stories to get revenge on Carla. "Mrs. Johnson, isn't it true that you never liked Carla, that you resented her marriage to your son?" I looked him directly in the eye. "I wanted to like Carla. I tried for years. But no, I didn't resent her for marrying Thomas. I resented the way she treated me when Thomas wasn't looking, how she tried to isolate me from him, how she made me feel like a burden in my own family." "And isn't it convenient that you now have custody of Lucas and control over all of Thomas's assets? Wasn't that what you wanted all along?" I felt rage rise, but I kept my voice calm. "What I wanted was my son alive. What I wanted was to see my grandson grow up with his father. What I have now is a traumatized child who lost his father and, for all practical purposes, also lost his mother." "There is nothing convenient about that, sir." The trial lasted 3 weeks. In the end, the jury took only 4 hours to reach a verdict. Gregory Davis was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Carla, due to her cooperation agreement, received a sentence of 15 to 20 years for complicity in manslaughter. With good behavior, she might be eligible for parole in 10 years. When the judge read the sentences, I didn't feel the relief or satisfaction I expected. Justice had been served, yes, but Thomas was still dead. Lucas was still without parents, and I still had to pick up the pieces of our shattered family. Outside the courthouse, a reporter pushed a microphone towards me. "Mrs. Johnson, how do you feel now that justice has been served for your son?" I looked at the camera, thinking of thousands of people watching, expecting tears or satisfied revenge. "There is no real justice for murder," I replied simply. "Only consequences. Thomas won't come back no matter how long Gregory Davis spends in prison. Now my focus is my grandson, ensuring he grows up, knowing how much his father loved him, and trying to build some form of normalcy in our lives." I walked away from the cameras, exhausted to my bones. In the car, I looked at the gray winter sky and let the tears finally come, not for the verdict, but for the long road still ahead, Lucas and me. That night, after tucking Lucas in, I sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea and my favorite photo of Thomas. Him smiling broadly on his college graduation day, young and full of promise. "We did it, son," I whispered to the photo. "Not how you planned. Certainly not how I ever imagined. But we did it. Now I'm going to take care of your boy, and I swear he will grow up knowing what kind of man his father was." The house was quiet except for the ticking of the clock and the occasional creak of the old beams. Our house, mine and Lucas's now. A new beginning built on the ashes of a tragedy. As I looked around the kitchen where I cooked thousands of meals, at the living room where Thomas played as a child and later watched games with Lucas, I realized this house held more good memories than bad, and maybe with time and effort we could create even more. For the first time in many months, I allowed myself to feel a small seed of hope, not for the life we lost that was irrevocably destroyed, but for the life we could still build, Lucas and me together. Spring arrived in Denver with an explosion of color after the long gray winter. Tulips and daffodils emerged in the front garden planted by Thomas years before. Lucas and I took on the task of renewing the backyard, transforming it into a space where he could play while I watched from the porch. The 6 months since the trial's end had been a period of adjustment and slow healing. Lucas continued therapy, working through the complex feelings about his parents, the loss of one and the betrayal of the other. As his permanent legal guardian, I now had full responsibility for his education, health, and emotional well-being. It was no easy task at 68, but I discovered resources in myself I didn't know I possessed. I learned to play video games with him, to help with science fair projects, to navigate the complicated social world of a 4th grader. The nights were the hardest for him. Frequent nightmares would make him wake up crying, calling for his father. On a Saturday afternoon, while we were planting cherry tomatoes in the garden, Lucas suddenly stopped, his small trowel still in hand. "Grandma, do you think we should visit Mom?" The question took me by surprise. Carla was serving her sentence in a state prison about 2 hours away. She had visitation rights, but so far Lucas hadn't expressed a desire to see her. "Would you like that, honey?" I asked carefully. He bit his lip, so much like Thomas when he was thoughtful. "I don't know. Sometimes I miss her, but then I remember what she did to Dad and I get angry." I placed my dirt-covered hand on his. "Those feelings are completely normal, Lucas. You can miss her and still be angry about what happened. Both can be true at the same time." "Do you visit her?" I shook my head. "No, I don't visit her." "Do you hate her?" That was an even harder question. I took a moment to really think about it before answering. "I don't hate Carla," I finally replied. "Hate requires a lot of energy. Energy I prefer to spend on you and the positive memory of your father. I am furious about the choices she made, deeply hurt by what she allowed to happen to Thomas. But hate, no. Mostly I just feel sadness for everything that was lost." Lucas nodded, absorbing that. "If I want to visit her someday, would you take me?" "Of course." I promised. "When you're ready, if you want to, I will take you. That's a decision you can make when you feel the time is right." Lucas went back to digging in the dirt, planting a small tomato seedling. We worked in silence for a few minutes, the warm sun on our backs, the rich smell of damp earth around us. "Grandma," he said finally, "thanks for not making me choose. I felt a lump in my throat. This 9-year-old boy understood emotional nuances that many adults never grasp. "I will never make you choose," I replied. "You can love your father, miss your mother, and still live happily with me. All those feelings can exist at the same time." That night after Lucas was asleep, I sat on the back porch with a cup of chamomile tea. The spring sky was dotted with stars, and the air carried the scent of freshly bloomed flowers. I thought about the conversation with Lucas and how slowly we were building a new normal. The next day I received an unexpected phone call. It was Karen, the social worker assigned to follow our case. "Mrs. Johnson, I'd like to schedule a visit for this week. There's something we need to discuss in person." The tone of her voice alarmed me. "Is there a problem with Lucas's guardianship?" No, she hurried to say. "The guardianship is perfectly secure. It's another matter related to Carla." 2 afternoons later, Karen was sitting in my living room, a thick folder on the coffee table between us. Lucas was at a friend's house for a school project, so we had privacy. "Margaret," Karen began, her tone professional but kind, "Carla has filed a formal request for supervised visits with Lucas." I felt my stomach sink. "Does she have that right?" "Legally, yes. As his mother, even incarcerated, she maintains certain parental rights unless they are specifically terminated by the court, which didn't happen in her case." I took a deep breath. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means the court is considering allowing monthly supervised visits at the prison. Lucas would be accompanied by a court-appointed professional, not necessarily you." The idea of Lucas visiting that grim environment facing guards' metal detectors and the oppressive atmosphere of the prison was deeply unsettling. "What is your professional opinion on this, Karen? Would it be good for Lucas?" She hesitated clearly, choosing her words carefully. "Research shows that maintaining some contact with incarcerated parents generally benefits children in the long run, as long as the relationship wasn't abusive." Carla was never physically abusive to Lucas as far as we know, but she allowed his father to be poisoned. I pointed out, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "Yes, and that's why the visits would be supervised and conditional," Karen explained. "A psychologist would evaluate how Lucas reacts after each visit." I closed my eyes for a moment. "And if Lucas doesn't want to go, then he won't be forced," Karen assured me. "The judge has made it clear that Lucas's wishes will carry significant weight in this decision, considering his age and maturity." After Karen left, I sat alone for a long time trying to process this new complication in our lives. On one hand, I wanted to protect Lucas from any contact with the person who had conspired in his father's death. On the other, I knew that completely blocking that contact could create future resentments. That night, after Lucas returned and we had dinner, I sat with him in his room as he got ready for bed. "Lucas, I need to tell you something important." I began choosing my words carefully. "Your mother has requested to visit you." His eyes widened. "Here is she getting out of prison?" "No, not here. It would be visits at the prison once a month, and only if you want to, honey. No one will force you to do this if you're not ready." And Lucas was quiet, pulling idly at a loose thread on his blanket. "Do you want me to go?" he finally asked. "I want you to do what you feel is right for you," I answered honestly. "You don't need to decide now. Think about it. Talk to your therapist at your next session." He nodded slowly. "Can I think about it for a little?" "All the time you need," I assured him. 2 weeks later, Lucas found me after dinner while I was washing the dishes. "Grandma," he said, his voice small but determined, "I think I want to see Mom. Just once to see what it's like." I dried my hands on the dish towel and turned to him. "Are you sure?" "Dr. Michelle said I can go once and see how I feel," he explained, referring to his therapist, "and that I don't have to keep going if I don't like it." "Then that's what we'll do," I agreed, pulling him into a hug. "Just one visit, and then we'll decide the next step." The first visit to the state prison was as tense and uncomfortable as I feared. Lucas was visibly nervous as we went through security, his eyes wide at the high walls, fences, and armed guards. We agreed that I would wait in the visitors area, while he, accompanied by the social worker, Claire, would meet Carla in the supervised visitation room. An hour later, Lucas returned, his face an unreadable mask of emotions. In the car on the way home, he remained silent for several minutes before finally speaking. "She looks different," he said. "Older and sad." I nodded, keeping my eyes on the road. "I imagine so." "She cried a lot," Lucas continued. "She said she was very sorry about what happened to Dad, that it was Uncle Gregory's fault, that she didn't know what to do." I kept my voice neutral, determined not to influence his interpretation. "How did you feel hearing that?" Lucas thought for a moment. "Confused, sad, a little angry too. She kept saying she loves me, that she misses me, but if she really loved me that much, why did she let that happen to Dad? Why didn't she save him?" The wisdom of that child left me speechless for a moment. "That's a very important question, Lucas, and a very difficult one." "I said that to her," he continued. "I asked her why she didn't save Dad, if she knew what Uncle Gregory was doing." My heart raced. "And what did she say?" "She just cried more and said she was scared that Uncle Gregory threatened her. But I don't know if I believe her, Grandma." I reached out and squeezed his hand gently. "Sometimes we don't know what to believe, and that's okay. You were very brave today." "I want to go home now," he said simply. The following week, Lucas's therapist called us in for a joint session. She explained that Lucas was processing very complex feelings about the visit. "He's dealing with a deep internal conflict," Dr. Michelle explained. "On one hand, there's the natural love for his mother and the desire to believe her. On the other, there's the growing understanding of the gravity of what happened and the feeling of betrayal." "What can we do to help him?" I asked. "Keep doing exactly what you've been doing, Margaret. Offer a safe space to express all those feelings without judgment, without pressure to choose sides, and respect whatever decision he makes about future visits." Lucas decided not to visit Carla again in the following months. Instead, they began to exchange letters, a form of communication that gave Lucas time to process his emotions and respond when he felt ready. I read all of Carla's letters before giving them to him to ensure the content was appropriate, but I never censored anything or read the responses he sent. Summer arrived with long, hot days. Lucas joined a Little League baseball team, and I spent my afternoons watching his games, cheering every hit, offering comfort after every loss. Our social circle naturally expanded. Parents of other players, neighbors, members of the support group for grandparents raising grandchildren, which I had started attending. At one of those support group meetings, I met Hector, a 70-year-old widower, raising his 12-year-old granddaughter after losing his daughter to cancer. Something in his calm, gentle manner immediately drew me in. "It's a tough road, isn't it?" he commented one day as we had coffee after the meeting. "Our aging bodies while we run after kids with infinite energy." I laughed, recognizing the truth in his words. "Sometimes I feel like I've gone back 40 years. Baseball games, science projects, arguments about which superhero movie is the best. But you wouldn't change it for anything, would you?" Hector smiled, his blue eyes twinkling with understanding. "For nothing," I agreed. Over the weeks, Hector and I began to see each other regularly. Sometimes with the kids, Olivia, his granddaughter, and Lucas got along surprisingly well, and sometimes just the two of us for coffee or a walk in the park. It was a comfortable friendship, without pressure or expectations, just the pleasant company of someone who truly understood my situation. On a particularly hot afternoon in August, we were all at the park, Lucas and Olivia running around on the grass, Hector and I sitting in the shade of an old oak tree. "I was thinking," Hector said suddenly, "the Denver Zoo has a special night exhibit next Friday. The kids would love it. Maybe we could all go together." I turned to look at him, noticing the slight nervousness in his voice. "That would be great. Lucas has been talking about that exhibit for weeks." Hector smiled, looking relieved. "Great. Is it a date then?" I felt a blush rise to my neck, something I hadn't experienced in decades. "A date? Well, yes." Hector cleared his throat, suddenly shy. "A family date with the kids, but still, I thought we could call it that." I laughed, surprised by how natural it felt. "A date would be lovely, Hector." That night, I sat on the edge of Lucas's bed after turning out the lights, our nightly ritual. Lucas, what would you think if we went to the zoo on Friday with Hector and Olivia? That would be awesome, he exclaimed. Then he paused, a perceptive look crossing his face. Grandma, do you like Mr. Hector? Like. It was my turn to be speechless, taken aback by his perception. Well, yes, I think I do like him. He's a good friend. Lucas nodded with wisdom beyond his years. I think it's cool. Mr. Hector is nice. And Olivia's pretty cool too, even though she's older. So you wouldn't mind if we sometimes all go out together as a different family? We're already a different family, Grandma, Lucas replied simply. Families come in all kinds of shapes, Dr. Michelle said. The important thing is that we love and take care of each other. I swallowed the lump that formed in my throat. When did you get so wise, kiddo? He shrugged, smiling. I learned from the best. As summer gave way to autumn, our life continued to evolve. Lucas returned to school now in 5th grade with new friends and challenges. Hector and I gradually grew closer, our friendship naturally evolving into something deeper. It was a mature, quiet relationship, built on mutual respect and shared understanding. 1 year after Thomas's death, we held a small memorial ceremony in the garden Lucas and I had cultivated together. We planted a young apple tree, Thomas's favorite fruit, and invited only a few close people. Richard Fuentes, who had become a trusted friend. A few of Thomas's work colleagues who had stayed in touch. Hector and Olivia, and 2 distant cousins who had supported Lucas during the trial. As we gathered around the newly planted tree, Lucas stepped forward holding a piece of paper. I wrote something for my dad, he announced, his voice small but firm. We all fell into respectful silence as he began to read. Dear Dad, it's been a year since you've been gone. Grandma said writing might help, even though you can't really read it. I'm in 5th grade now and I play baseball. Coach says I have a good arm like you did. Sometimes I get angry because you're not here to see my games or help me with math homework. Grandma tries, but she says math was never her strong suit. She laughs when she says that. I miss you every day, but it doesn't hurt as much as it used to. Dr. Michelle says that's normal, that the pain changes over time. It doesn't mean I love you any less. Grandma has taken really good care of me. She makes chocolate chip pancakes on Sundays like you used to, and she always lets me pick the movie on Friday night. We have new friends now too, mister. Hector and Olivia, they're cool. I wrote to Mom last week. It's weird, but I think it's the right thing to do. I'm still angry at her, but Dr. Michelle says I can be angry and still care about someone at the same time. I promise I'll remember all the things you taught me, how to tie my shoes, how to throw the perfect pitch, and how to be kind even when it's hard. I love you forever, Lucas. When he finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Lucas carefully folded the paper and placed it in a small hole he had dug near the tree, covering it with soil. This way, Dad will always know how I'm doing, he explained. That night, after everyone had left and Lucas was in bed, I sat on the porch, looking at the newly planted tree, its delicate silhouette against the night sky. You would be proud of him, Thomas, I whispered into the quiet night air. So proud, just like I am. I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. The life we had now was not the one we had planned. It certainly wasn't the one Thomas had imagined when he prepared that secret safety deposit box to protect me. It was a life built from the ashes of a tragedy marked by deep scars. But it was also a life full of love, new connections, and growth. Lucas was thriving, learning to navigate complex emotions with wisdom beyond his years. I had discovered reserves of strength I never knew I possessed. And perhaps most surprisingly, I had found a new purpose, and even a new chance at companionship with Hector, something I never imagined possible at 68. Life goes on in ways we could never predict, I murmured to the night, a melancholy smile on my lips. Doesn't it, son? A soft breeze rustled the leaves of the apple tree, as if in response, and for a moment I felt Thomas close again, his love enveloping us, as it always had, unconditional, protective, and eternal. Nothing would erase what we had lost. Nothing would change the terrible choices Carla and Gregory had made, but the future was still ours to shape, mine, Lucas's, and now Hector's and Olivia's too. An unconventional family built not just by blood, but by choice and love. 3 years passed since that first memorial tree was planted in our garden. Lucas was now 12, growing fast, his features more and more like Thomas's. He excelled at baseball, had a small group of loyal friends, and continued his therapy sessions, though only monthly now. Our expanded family had found a comfortable rhythm. Hector and I got married in a small garden ceremony 2 years ago, with Lucas and Olivia as our only official witnesses. We decided to keep our separate houses, me with Lucas, Hector with Olivia. But we spent most weekends together creating new family traditions. Carla continued to serve her sentence now in her 4th year of 15. Lucas had resumed occasional visits about every 3 months, always accompanied by a court-appointed professional. The visits were difficult, often emotional, but Lucas insisted on wanting to maintain them. "I need to understand," he explained to me once, "not to forgive not yet, but to understand." On a beautiful Saturday morning, the mailman delivered a letter addressed to me. The return address surprised me. Carla Johnson, Colorado State Prison, Women's Wing. In 3 years, Carla had never tried to contact me directly. Our communication was strictly through official channels related exclusively to Lucas. Seeing her name on the envelope made me instantly tense. Hector was with me when I opened the letter, his comforting presence beside me. "Margaret, I am writing this letter after a long time of reflection and several discarded attempts. There are no adequate words for what I need to say, but I will try anyway. First, I never asked for your forgiveness because I know I don't deserve it. What happened to Thomas, what I allowed to happen, is unforgivable. I live with that knowledge every day, every moment. But today, I am not writing about forgiveness. I am writing to say thank you. Thank you for giving Lucas stability and love when I destroyed his world. Thank you for allowing him to visit me, for never speaking ill of me to him. I know this from our conversations, for letting him form his own opinions, even when it would be easier for you to teach him to hate me. Lucas tells me about baseball, about school, about you and Hector and Olivia. He talks about Thomas's tree in the garden, about how you add a new plant every year. He seems balanced, happy as possible, and that is entirely thanks to you. I am also writing to tell you that I have stopped fighting for a reduction in my sentence. I refused my last parole hearing. I will serve the full 15 years. It's the least I can do. Finally, I want you to know that when I get out of here, I will not interfere in the life you have built. Lucas will be 21 then, an adult able to decide what relationship he wants to have with me, if any. I will fully respect that decision. Thomas was right to protect you. He always saw what I refused to see, the strength and heart that you have. I was not worthy of either of you. With respect and gratitude, Carla. When I finished reading, I realized I was crying. They weren't tears of sadness or anger, but something more complex, a recognition of the terrible weight we all carried, and perhaps a small relief at that late admission. "Are you going to respond?" Hector asked gently. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I need to think." For days I carried that letter with me, rereading it in quiet moments, trying to understand my own conflicting emotions. I hadn't forgiven Carla. I doubted I ever could completely. But there was something in her letter that felt genuine, a glimpse of the person she might have been under different circumstances. A week later, I sat at the kitchen table and began to write a response. "Carla, I received your letter. It was unexpected, but I appreciate your honesty. I cannot offer you forgiveness. It is not mine to give. Thomas was the one who would need to forgive, and that chance was taken from him. But I acknowledge your decision to take full responsibility by serving your full sentence. It is a step in the right direction. As for Lucas, I will continue to do what I have always done, put him first. This means allowing him to maintain some kind of relationship with you as long as it is healthy for him. It also means protecting him from any further harm. He is growing into a remarkable young man, kind, thoughtful, sometimes profoundly wise for his age. I see so much of Thomas in him, not just in appearance but in character. I believe that when the time comes, Lucas will make his own decisions about his future relationship with you. I will not interfere in those decisions, whatever they may be. Margaret." It was a short response without emotional effusion, but honest. I sealed the envelope and put it in the mail the next day. As the years passed, Lucas continued to grow, transforming, from a boy into a teenager. At 15, he was almost as tall as Thomas had been, with the same easy smile, the same infectious laugh. His visits to Carla had become less frequent now, only twice a year, but he maintained regular correspondence with her. One evening after returning from one of those visits, Lucas sat with me on the porch, looking out at the memorial garden we had expanded over the years. The original apple tree now produced its first fruits, and around it grew rose bushes, lavender, and a small wooden bench where I often sat to read. "Grandma," Lucas began, his voice deeper now, a sign of adolescence in full swing, "I've always wanted to ask you something, but I never found the right time." "You can ask anything," I replied, setting aside the book I was reading. "Do you think Dad knew what was happening about what Uncle Gregory and Mom were doing?" The question took me by surprise. In all these years, Lucas had never asked so directly about the details of Thomas's death. "I think he suspected something was wrong," I answered carefully. "That's why he took steps to protect me, to protect us. He left the safety deposit box with the evidence, the apartment, everything prepared." Lucas nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about that a lot lately, about how Dad must have felt suspecting but not being sure, imagining if his own wife could be doing something like that." "It must have been unbearably difficult for him," I agreed. "You know what's strange," he said. "The older I get, the harder it is to remember specific things about him, like what his voice sounded like exactly, or what it felt like when he hugged me. But at the same time, I feel like I understand him better now than when I was a kid." I reached out and squeezed his shoulder. "I think that's natural. Our memories change, but our understanding deepens. And you have so much of him in you, you know, not just in appearance." Lucas smiled, a bittersweet smile. "Mom said the same thing today. She said sometimes it's hard for her to look me because I look so much like him." We sat in silence for a moment, contemplating the garden and the stars that were beginning to appear in the night sky. "You know, Grandma," Lucas said finally, "I think I understand now why you never tried to make me hate Mom even after everything that happened. You knew I would need to figure out my own feelings about it." "Complicated feelings are part of being human," I replied. "Anger, love, disappointment, longing. They can all coexist at the same time. No one can tell you how to feel, not even me." "I hate her for what she did," Lucas admitted, his voice low. "Or at least I hate her actions, what she allowed to happen. But I can't hate her completely. Does that make me a horrible person?" "That makes you a human being," I replied firmly. "And an extraordinarily compassionate one, considering everything." Lucas nodded, seeming to find some comfort in my words. "There's something else I wanted to tell you. I've decided I want to study law like Dad. I want to help people like us, families affected by crime." My heart swelled with pride. "Your father would be so proud of that choice." "You think?" he asked suddenly, sounding like the younger child he once was. "I am absolutely sure," I replied. Later that night, after Lucas had gone up to his room, I sat alone in the garden under the soft moonlight. I thought about Thomas, about how he had foreseen the need to protect me, about how his love continued to guide our lives so many years later. "Look at the man your son is becoming," I whispered to the night wind. "Look how he's turning pain into purpose, how he's finding his way through the darkness. You prepared him well for this, even in the short time you had with him." Somewhere I imagined Thomas smiling, that gentle smile that Lucas had inherited. Not because I believed he could really hear me, but because keeping his memory alive in that way gave me strength. At 74, I had lived more than I ever imagined. I lost a husband, then a son. I faced unimaginable betrayals and deep grief. But I also found new beginnings, an unexpected love with Hector, an expanded family with Olivia, and the incomparable joy of watching Lucas grow and thrive against all odds. Life rarely follows the path we plan. Sometimes it takes us down dark and winding roads through storms that seem endless. But even in the bleakest circumstances, even when we lose those we love most, there is always the possibility of finding light again if we have the courage to keep walking. Thomas taught me that with his last act of love. that silver key, and the carefully gathered evidence. He knew I would find a strength I never suspected I possessed. He knew that even when all seemed lost, there was still a path forward. And he was right. Now, if you like this story, click subscribe and tell me in the comments what part left you speechless. Oh, and don't forget to become a member to get access to exclusive videos that I don't post here. I'll be waiting for you there.